So today I'd like to talk about Siren Blood Curse, also known as Siren New Translation if you have the international version. And this version I purchased off eBay. It's, I don't know, the Hong Kong version or something, because I heard the American version was censored, although I'm not sure this version wasn't censored, because I didn't see anything particularly objectionable or crazy. But it did come with an awesome warning sticker, even though it wasn't that bad, and I think I took a picture of it, so hopefully I can put it in here for the video. So yeah, that's a pretty severe warning for a game that wasn't really all that gory or violent. But anyway, it was a very interesting game, and I actually played the demo. I think it came out in 2008. Let's see, is that right? Yeah. And I played the demo when it came out, and I was kind of not impressed with the controls. I wasn't as big into horror games back then, so I didn't really give it a second thought. But people have talked about the Siren series, and this, I guess, is technically maybe a remake of the first Siren. I'm not really sure, but I've heard the first Siren is super duper hard, and this one did not seem super duper hard, so I was glad to play it instead. I mean, the graphics aren't great, and the frame rate is bad. Pretty bad, especially when you use a sight jack feature, which is the big sort of gameplay twist to the Siren series, is you can look through the eyes of another character, but the problem is that it has to render another viewport, and so your frame rate's like cut in half, and so it's and then they put like blurs and everything on, so then it really hurts my eyes. So I wasn't super thrilled about that feature. But the one thing that even though the controls are a little strange and the graphics and the frame rate weren't great, is it definitely has a lot of atmosphere, which is really interesting. I mean, to me, the most atmospheric games are, like Silent Hill and Fatal Frame, but this definitely captures that sort of atmosphere. They have, a lot of dark scenes, and you only have the flashlight, which with my TV ended up being like too dark to see. I had to jack the brightness way up, but even just like the walking on these weird fields, because it actually takes place in like repeat. It repeats a couple different locations. And so, like, one of them, it's sort of like red sky, and everything looks muddy and gray and brown, and it definitely has a strong atmosphere. But, I mean, there's a couple different things I want to say about the game. Firstly, it's episodic, kind of. It's split up into 12 episodes, and each episode is split up into like 5 chapters. And the story itself is kind of confusing. I played the game and I'm like, I didn't quite get it. And then I read like the notes, and there's like one note that after you get the game, you can go back and read this note, and then it sort of explains things. And so, I don't know, the game's 7 years old, so spoilers, but I guess it's a time loop, which is really like an interesting thing to me, an interesting thing from a game mechanic perspective, but it's not presented very well. I mean, in that I didn't know what was going on with the story pretty much through the entire game, so I kind of like lost interest mostly. And then it sort of seems weird that it's structured in these little segments, and then it's split up, and it's not like they put a to be continued screen right in the middle of things, but it's a bunch of different chunks with a bunch of different characters, and then they take place in different time periods. So, like, sometimes I guess the world resets because it's a time loop and then different things happen. So, I mean, it really feels broken, like you're just playing fragments of something, which is kind of unfulfilling to the player. So, I don't know quite what they were going for there, but at least for me, it seemed to kind of miss the mark. I mean, I'm all for time loops, but, like, I didn't quite realize it was a time loop. I mean, they put up the date, but I wasn't paying attention to any of the dates, and then it just seemed like I was replaying things, but different things were happening, and then I'm like, okay, maybe it's a time loop, but why is it a time loop? I thought this was a horror game. I didn't know this was sci-fi or whatever. And also, the final boss was like, I mean, it's an interesting idea, but it had, like, the most hideous eyesore graphics ever that didn't really make any sense, so I know you can probably find screenshots, but it was very odd compared to, you know, what came before it, and you know, certainly I liked a lot of the content and the ideas, but I mean, so the atmosphere is good. There's some good things that happen in it, some good scares, interesting things go on, but just as a whole, it's kind of jumbled. But the other thing is, the gameplay is kind of weird, and I mean, I can't really compare to the original Siren. Maybe someday I'll play it with, like, an emulator and save state the crap out of it in a walkthrough, but like, sometimes it was very easy to beat the game without a walkthrough for me, and I'm very bad at games, because basically it put up little objective marks, and then it said, go here, and do this, and then you switch over to the map, you see what you're doing, and then, you know, it updates your objectives constantly, which, you know, is kind of nice, to some extent. Like, for a horror game, I felt like, you know, it was a bit gamey and sort of taking me out of the experience, and also constantly checking the map. But then the alternative, in some of the puzzles, it doesn't give you a waypoint, and it's just like, kill the brain Shibito. Shibito are their sort of zombie monsters. And brain Shibitos, I don't even know what like, some of them I don't know if I ever would have figured out which was the brain Shibito, because, like, they don't look consistent. It's not like, you know, the brain bug in Starship Troopers. It's like, you know, a Shibito that, I don't know, maybe has little worms for eyes or something, maybe? I don't know. And then, like, in some situations, it could be in different places. So, I mean, in that situation, you know, if I weren't using a walkthrough, which I used a walkthrough for, you know, a good chunk of the game. Sometimes I'm like, hey, I can do this without a walkthrough, but other times I was just like, nah, I don't want to try. There's also some stealth segments which were kind of tricky, and I failed a lot even with a walkthrough, and it definitely, and this is probably sort of going along the lines of the first Siren, is it's a really interesting gameplay mechanic where the idea is, I think you have to sight jack a bunch of the Shibita, the enemies, figure out their patterns as they go through their day-to-day life, because they're interesting. They're zombies, but they sort of do what it was, that they sort of have the memory of their lives before, and so they go through the motions. So, like, there could be a female Shibito, you know, making dinner for her family or something like that. I don't think she'd actually be cooking dinner, but she'd be fooling around with the pots and pans. And so there's one puzzle that like, basically you have to monitor them all. You hide in a closet, you figure out what their patterns are, and, you know, there's a high school girl scribbling in a journal, and the dad's, like, checking on her, and then you have to move around, and I mean, it's a really clever gameplay mechanic, but it's and I mean, even, you know, using the walkthrough, it was challenging, you know, getting it right, partially because I was just trying to run by a certain enemy, because I was like, I'm terrible at stealth, I don't want to wait, I'm impatient, and it checkpointed me right by the enemy, so I'm like, I probably can just run by. Took me a bunch of tries, but so it's weird. it's a brilliant mechanic, but it's a very unforgiving mechanic, and I don't know. I mean, certainly I always side on the, I don't want the challenge. I don't want, even if it's cool, if it's too hard, it's just not worth it. If I have to play through the same thing over and over again, it's not worth it. And certainly with the walkthrough, I didn't have to quite as much, but it's definitely, had its moments, but then, like, it was kind of weird playing the game, though, because it had such a uneven difficulty curve. I mean, there were some that, it basically held your hand, and then it didn't really hold your hand at all for others, and so, I don't know, I mean, obviously I had the benefit of playing with the walkthrough, but it was, I don't know, like, gameplay-wise, it was kind of rough and uneven, and, probably be better if they said, we're making a really tricky game and that's that, or we're going to make a, more accessible game. But yeah, I mean, overall, I enjoyed it. It had a good sense of atmosphere, and, it had a lot of good elements, but I guess just for me with the story and the difficulty spikes, it didn't feel cohesive. It didn't really come together. And I can't play I haven't played the other Siren, so I can't compare this game to the other ones. And but it's definitely interesting, and I think one of the things that I liked the most about it is the commitment to the environment and creating this the feel of the game, and this sort of is what we're trying to do with Devastated Dreams, so it's kind of a good reference. But basically, I think they were trying to create like 1976 Japan, and so in like a small city, and of course I wasn't alive in 1976, and I haven't been to a place like that in Japan. I have had the good fortune to visit Japan, but nothing like this. And so it was neat to see, to see sort of what that's like. And I don't know if you played Shenmue. I love Shenmue. But that was one of my favorite things, is like, look at me, I'm in a 1986, or was it 86? I don't know. But I'm in the 80s in Japan. Holy crap, this is awesome. And there were so many things, it was before I had actually been to Japan, and there were so many things that I didn't really quite get, like, why are all these vending machines here? Why are there capsule toys and, things like that. But then when I went to Japan, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just what, it's like. And, the things about, putting on slippers when you're inside and things like that. Like, Shenmue had this amazing commitment to creating that world, and I think that's, one of the things that we should think of, as game designers, is think of ourselves as world builders. How can we create a compelling world that people want to live in, people want to explore that space? And you look at games like Gone Home, and I think they do a really good job at that. I mean, I loved looking at the X-Files VHS tapes, and it reminded me of, when I used to videotape The Muppet Show and X-Files and everything, and, programming your VCR, these things that people won't, our kids, my kid will never understand what that's like, and but it's interesting to try and place the game in something that a lot of people don't understand. The rural Philippines is a very new and unique experience. Certainly I've had very little experience in that aspect, and, I've been relying on the experience of my wife and her relatives and things like that, and, reading about it. But I think creating a world that's unique and different than the ones that most of us, the game-playing audience live in, can be really powerful, because you can create something, really different, something interesting, where people can appreciate and enjoy being in that space. And so, a lot of the little details, sort of tell a story. At least that's the plan in Devastated Dreams, where you'll learn about the people living there and their dreams and what's going on. And so I'm really excited about the game, obviously. And that's a huge segue from talking about Siren, Blood Curse. But anyway, hopefully you'll forgive my indulgence. So anyway, check out Devastated Dreams and check out Siren. Thanks for watching.